Welcome back, guys, and today we're going to be going over Drive to Survive fans and, more importantly, why the new fan base is so hated by the original fan base. Now, ever since Drive to Survive has come into the sport and into the limelight, it is now in its 6th season, and it's fair to say that the core F1 fan base aren't really big fans of Drive to Survive fans. Now, what is a Drive to Survive fan? A Drive to Survive fan is someone who was introduced to the sport by the series, or maybe through like social media posts or TikTok posts, they found their way to the sport. Now, even though a lot of people dislike them, I'd like to start off by saying that Drive to Survive fans are crucial for the sport. In a sport like F1, money is king, money is vital. Now, if F1 runs out of money, unlike sports like football or mixed martial arts, or maybe even basketball, where equipment is so easily sourced and you can make a game essentially out of nothing, F1 is one of those sports that you really do rely on sponsors, you rely on attention, and you rely on a lot of the big money makers. And one of those big money makers is getting your sport out there, getting recognition out there, and showing sponsors that you are part of a growing brand that is F1. And so Drive to Survive, bringing new fans into the sport and increasing the value of F1, has only really helped the sport, despite whether you like their fans or not. Now, me personally, I think F1 fans are good all around. Obviously, you have some toxic fans, you know, the Lewis fans, the Max fans. Even myself, I'm a Lewis and a Max fan, but even I can acknowledge that their fan bases are extremely toxic. That doesn't take away from the fact that most F1 fans, majority F1 fans, are pretty good people and are pretty good sports, whether their team are winning and losing. And unlike other sports like football, there is less of a tribal nature behind the teams. If you are a Haas fan, you can still support Mercedes. If you're a Ferrari fan, you can still support Williams. It's not as strict. Now, the first reason, and in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons why people don't like Drive to Survive fans, is they have bad wheel knowledge. Now, Drive to Survive is in its 6th season of its running, and to put that into perspective, when you have any other season that has been 6 seasons in, it's really difficult to jump in at the 6th season and understand everything, because the characters if we're talking about a regular TV show, the characters would have progressed, you know, their motivations would have progressed, everything will be on a deeper stage. If you think about jumping into Game of Thrones at season 6, that wouldn't really be possible, and you wouldn't really be able to grasp the story. But if you think about F1, you can jump into Drive to Survive in season 6. And that is because Drive to Survive doesn't do a good job in the slightest of informing F1 fans about the intricacies and the technical side of the sport. In fact, most seasons is a rehash and is very predictable of the types of content they're going to produce that is very surface level. When Drive to Survive was initially announced, everyone thought it would be this deep dive that we'd get to go into the innards, the bits we don't see of the drivers, the teams, how cars are made, everything. Now, although some of that is true and we do get a behind closed doors of some of the drivers and some of the teams, what we can also see is that there is still a massive veil on the drivers, and we are only allowed, well, let's say a -1 surface level. We aren't progressing down slowly, we're staying at a steady depth. Now, this has meant that someone who's been watching Drive to Survive from season 1 all the way till season 6, their wheel knowledge, their knowledge about F1, the drivers, the history, may not, well, probably, it definitely won't be comparable to someone who has just simply watched some races and did their own research. In fact, I'm sure most Drive to Survive fans wouldn't be able to name 5 world champions outside those in the 2010s. This is bad, but obviously every F1 fan starts somewhere. Every F1 fan, you know, starts off not knowing about the sport, and we all grow and we all learn. We watch races, we hear the commentary, we do our own research, we look back at older races we might have missed. You know, some of us have our favorite YouTubers that we might watch that give us deep dives into the history of the sport. But what makes Drive to Survive fans so infuriating is their perceived knowledge of the sport, that because they've been watching Drive to Survive, they now have this extra knowledge about the sport that F1 fans that didn't watch it don't even know. And so now they think they're extra knowledgeable about a sport that they barely know anything about. This is in fact the Dunning-Kruger effect, in which you don't really know much about something. And so it makes you hyper confident that you know so much because you simply don't know what you don't know. And I think this is rampant in the F1 community, and it drives regular F1 fans or F1 fans that aren't necessarily into Drive to Survive insane, because it makes it a pain communicating with these fans that may have opinions and that may say certain things or do certain things that could only come from someone who doesn't know much about the sport. And leading off from this, I would say the biggest thing, other than the fact that they have bad wheel knowledge, is their heavy recency bias. Drive to Survive, I'm pretty sure, made its first season back in like 2017, and since then it's gone through every single season of F1, recently going to recap the 2023 season. Now, a lot of Drive to Survive fans, as I mentioned before, don't have a very in-depth knowledge of the sport, and so they have a lot of recency bias towards recent takes and recent opinions. Things like Vettel is washed because they only saw him at his later end of Ferrari and maybe some of Aston Martin. Or things like Max Verstappen is the greatest of all time because of things like the 2021 season. Now, I think this is less of an issue because we all have some takes that are really bad, in my opinion. Obviously, me not being perfect, I have some takes where I'm sure everyone else would go, yeah, this is a horrible take. But I think it's the clearly wrong takes and the unrelenting need to not want to know why those takes are bad. A lot of people can have some bad takes, but at least those takes have some root in reality. But to say that Vettel was never really a good driver, or he's not one of the best to ever do it, just because of his later end years in Ferrari and Aston Martin, is literally false. Couple this with the immature aspect of the fact that most people that do watch Drive to Survive are in fact younger, and so a lot of younger people coming into the sport, especially in the age of social media, means that there are going to be a lot more keyboard warriors, a lot more immature people, and so the Drive to Survive fan has been used as a slur to essentially say you're a kid that doesn't really know much about the sport. At the end of the day, Formula One is Formula One, and people have bad takes and don't know much about the sport. I used to have extremely bad takes and used to know nothing about the sport, and I'm sure you did too. But as long as we can all get along and enjoy F1, enjoy the races and enjoy the experience of the drivers, then I'm sure they will all work out fine. Not everyone needs to be a hardcore fan to be considered a fan. Not every fan needs to, start watching from 1997 or before Ayrton Senna was even born to be considered a true F1 fan. Someone could be considered a true F1 fan and start watching from last year. It's all about whether you actually like the sport and are you invested to actually try and learn about it. But yeah, guys, that was my take. Tell me what you think about Drive to Survive fans in the description below, and I'll see you in another video.